Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Getting Creative with Code session. My name is Jason Daponte, and an awful lot of you feel really far away. Do we smell? Do you hear this was like the geek session, so you're all sitting at the back? Come on forward, because we want to have a conversation in this session. So, and I promise these guys don't bite. I won't bite. I might scratch. No. Anyway, so we're here to talk about getting creative with code, and I have Wally from Darwin, based in Paris, and Sid from We Make Awesome in the UK. Yep. And they're going to tell you a little bit more about what they do. But I'm going to introduce myself first. That's the lucky part of being the moderator. I run a digital production company in London called The Swarm. And one of the things that we do, so one of the things that I think I've done through my whole career is work at the junction where content and code and technology come together. And unlike these two evil geniuses, I see myself and the people who work directly in my company as the boring guys because we're just the ideas guys. And the way that we work is in combination with different development teams based on specialties. And the reason that we work that way is because we like to work with the best people. And no offense to any of the other creatives in the room, but we're a dime a dozen. And finding the really best technology people, to our business, it's just absolutely crucial you find the best people because you've got to find the right people for the right technology to work with the right stories. And that's part of what we do as part of our process, to stitch things together. So when we were concerned about commuters getting a bad deal in London, we worked with mobile developers who know how to work with open government data to build an app that gets commuters refunds every time the underground makes them late. So, turning a bad commute into a check coming in the post was one of our projects. We're very lucky because our next project, which is going to be in May, we're going to be working with one of my work partners, Asta Valias, at the Media Center in Malmö in Sweden. And it's a bit of a dream for someone who loves code and creative because we're being given 6 computer science PhD students and a dance troupe and a week, and to come up with some sort of data-driven dance performance. And I'm just tickled to have the opportunity to do that. It might not be the most commercial project, but I think it's going to be absolutely great. So after that introduction, let me pass over to Wally. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys do?
Cool. Nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Wally. I'm not going to say my last name. You can read it or try at least. I'm the founder of Darwin, which is a digital social TV agency based in Paris. We're a year and a half old. I used to be a TV creative for Endable and Coyote, which are like companies you probably know. I was there for like 6 or 7 years, but I kind of felt frustrated because I couldn't really tell the stories I wanted to tell. So after that, I switched to digital, which is like to me one of the funnest places or spaces if you have ideas. So I worked for like a digital agency called Buzzman for a couple of years, where I was telling digital stories for brands. And after a while, I was like, man, I probably could make a mix of what I really love, which is content and TV content mostly, and digital. So I founded this agency a year and a half ago called Darwin that builds experiences, digital experiences most of the time around TV content. So how do you extend your brand, your TV brand, from a time slot of an hour to a 7 days a week experience? That's pretty much what we do, and we try to keep it as fun as it can be. That's it.
So I'm Sid. I run We Make Awesome, which is a collective of 5 of us who we all make stuff. Stuff ranging from mobile apps to physical hardware things, like fun toys. We kind of like putting smiles on people's faces. And so, unfortunately, something has to pay the bills. So we also do work for clients, and most of our clients are music industry based. So we do work for all the major labels, various indies, and then a few brands such as Coca-Cola, Microsoft, and Intel. And we, make all kinds of things. It's a lot of fun. It's a hobby for me. It's not a job. It's a hobby that I'm fortunate to get paid for. Because I would just be making things anyway. Like, for example, the other week we made HarlemShakeRoulette.com, which was just before the whole Harlem Shake stuff kicked off properly. And I massively regret that now. and we set it up so that people could submit their own Harlem Shakes, and we, at one point, we were getting a few hundred a day coming through to our main company email address, because I didn't bother setting up a separate one. So yeah, we make all kinds of things that hopefully people enjoy. We run a thing called searchinstagram.com, which gets roughly about 1 million visitors a month, which just sits there and just gets used by people. People seem to enjoy it. So yeah, that's kind of what we do.
Great, thanks. Now, when I kicked off, one of the things that I mentioned is that we spend a lot of time networking with developers and trying to find the right developers who are specialists in this and who are really good at that. And I see that as being very much like the producer's job used to be in TV, where you had to know the right directors and the right camera people and all of that. And we really, invest a lot of time in, making sure we know the right people for the projects and checking them out. And then, a big part of our process is marrying them up with the creatives. How do you guys do it in your companies? How does it work for you?
We're pretty much dreamers. We like to have big ideas, and we're not always sure of how we're going to manage to make them happen, but we do our best to make them happen. So the way we work, we are a set of creative and strategists, and we come up with really incredible ideas and entertaining ideas, and we go out there to find the best specialized developer in that field. We don't really have integrated developers in the agency because we've done so many different things within a year that there's no way, even if we had the best developer ever, that he could have done all that work. So I really think it's a matter of...
Even if you had Sid?
Sorry?
Even if you had Sid?
Even if I had Sid and his whole team, we really believe that you need to be humble about what you're best at, and we're really good at having great ideas, and we really believe that out there are all types of developers who have incredible skills, and that you need to go and source them out. That's how we work, at least.
Okay, Sid, tell us about how your process is. How do you guys work?
So we're all, the three developers, we're all jack of all trades, master of none. Technology moves so quickly that we're making stuff that wasn't possible 6 months ago. Wasn't possible, yeah. So we are constantly learning, and because we're constantly learning, we have to take quite a lot of time out from client work so that we keep learning new things and we keep playing. We are constantly playing with tech. So people come to us for things that have never been done before, that they're not sure how it would be done. We then, we have a motto which is code wins arguments. So we've got no idea if something is possible until we've tried. And we'll knock up a simple prototype over maybe a day, maybe a couple of days, which then, it might take a few weeks to polish it up, but you then have a much better idea of what's possible and what isn't. I mean, what I love about technology is that it moves so quickly. I would get bored otherwise, and I know the rest of the guys would be exactly the same. So we get Tom, who's our dreamer, our ideas guy. He will come up with an idea. We all work from home, right? But we use IRC, which is like old school chat rooms. It's like we're proper geeks, right? He will just throw down an idea in IRC, and if one of us likes it, we'll pick up it and we will roll with it there and then. So Harlem Shake Roulette, Tom threw in the idea, and 3 hours later it was up, live, ready, launched, was working. So that's kind of how we work. It's really, there's the whole agile, but it's kind of, we don't have scrum masters, and we don't do like how proper agile is. But
can I just ask
sure.
you, hold on one second. Just quick show of hands, do people know what agile is when we reference that? Some? Do you want to just give it, I mean, even if you don't do it, it sounds like you can explain it a little bit. And I think a lot of people are using it these days, so it'd be interesting to see the difference.
So there's the classic method, which is the waterfall method, which is where you come up with the idea, you then plan it, you then design it, you then build it, you then test it, you then launch it. Agile is very much a case of you're constantly changing and tweaking as you go along. So at the end of the project, quite often at the beginning of the project, you've got no idea what it is you actually want at the end. And more often than not, the thing you get at the end is what you want at the end, but it's very different to what you wanted at the beginning. So there's no point, especially for long projects, doing it down the waterfall method because things change so quickly. So because we're constantly tweaking, changing, modifying, whatever it is we're working on, obviously with whoever else is involved in the project, so that we can get whatever the best solution is at the end. So that's kind of what Agile is, if that makes sense.
And tell us a little bit how it differs the way that you guys work. It sounds a little more organic, maybe?
So, yeah, exactly that. So we kind of work in an agile way with regards to the fact that we are constantly, that we have so at the start of the project, we'll write up a brief, like, if it's a big project, we'll write up a brief overview of what kind of thing it is we're going to be doing. But ultimately, it's actually constantly tweaking, being refined and changing, etc. So at the end, it's what you want at the end rather than what you wanted at the beginning, which means that it's hopefully the best solution that you'll have. Because there are so many questions at the beginning of any project, right? Will this work? What is this the best way to do it? And ultimately, you won't know that until you start doing it. So that's why we work that way.
Okay. And do you guys do prototyping? How does that work for you?
Well, we consider technology as a creative tool. So we try to come up with ideas that are going to be stories, that are going to provide emotion. That's what we're aiming at. Sid talks about being agile. We just want to make sure that we get the emotion through. So we don't really care about how it's going to end up. All we want to be delivered is the emotion. So we're like, okay, we want people to enjoy this, to laugh at it. So how we're going to get there, we don't really know yet. So we closely work with developers like Sid, who are going to respond to our demand, and we're going to implement an A/B test and see how it works. Because between the time when you start the project, maybe in April, and when you have to deliver, maybe in June, so much has evolved that what you sold in April doesn't make any sense by the time you get to June. So we're afraid of what we call the old factor. We don't want our product to look or to sound or to feel old. So we constantly evolve and improve while we're building whether it's an app, whether it's a website, whether it's a video. We're constantly improving and reacting to what we see on the market, obviously.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Did you?
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. Best way for it.
Okay.
It's nothing better than putting a smile on someone's face as well.
There you go. How much of your guys' work is projects that you just come up with, make, prototype, or bring to market versus work for hire?
About half and half. So, so we all work from our own homes. We have no overheads. Our only overheads is the equipment, which you only really have to buy once. So we don't need to make sure that there's X amount of money in the bank to pay for office space and things like that. So, which is quite a vast amount. Well, is a fair amount, right? So, we actually, it's about half and half, depending on the project. We also work. Although we have an hourly figure in our heads, we work from budget. So people tell us what the budget is, and we then go, it's going to take us roughly. It might take us this amount of time. Are we happy to do it for that kind of budget? Yeah or no? And so that's kind of how we work. It's very different to most companies, development companies anyway. It's, much more organic.
Okay, great. One of the things that I've found interesting working in this space is trying to get the different communities to learn how to talk to each other. So one of the things that we do a lot of the time is we run these development labs for broadcasters and brands and other types of content makers. And we always bring the developers in right from the start, which often sort of shakes people a little bit. Have you guys had experience of having to kind of learn how to translate, learn how to re-explain what you do? How has that gone when you bring your teams to clients, et cetera?
Like
no cigarette endorsements.
Sorry.
Joke. Sorry.
We're exactly on the tipping point between storytelling and TV storytelling and the digital world. And we're a bit like French and Spaniards. We seem to talk the same language, but we don't really understand each other, so we really need someone to translate. That's pretty much what we do. And we've got a team that's half from the TV and the storytelling industry, and half the team that are from the tech world. So we actually have all the knowledge required to build those kind of experiences. That's really important to us to master the language. We can talk to a TV producer and we can talk to a developer. We've got both skills, and that's really important to have someone that's capable of translating the needs and the expectations to one another. That's really a big point, a big skill we've got.
I mean, I've had to do that myself. I was saying when we had a chat earlier on that I've forced myself, I force myself regularly to learn how to do a little bit of coding so I can keep speaking the language to people and understand the constraints of what's possible and what's not. And though it's not a natural thing for me, I sort of see that as part of my sort of way of developing the craft that we're participating in. But one of the things, other things that we do on these labs is we get non-coders to make prototypes using whatever tools we can. I've done it with Legos, I've done it with just clickable PowerPoints, that type of thing. Have you ever done that with clients? Have you ever worked with people to try and get them to think through user journeys, think through that type of thinking?
Not yet.
No? How do you guys work when you don't know how to speak the same language as someone?
Well, so we, often, just simple sketches, right? Getting the client to do the wireframing themselves, because
Well done.
it's easier than us doing 10 and then sending it over when they already know what it is they want. And if it only takes them 5 minutes to just, like, I'm not expecting like a polished piece of art. Something on a napkin will do. Some kind of idea of what it is they're wanting, if they have that idea. But going back to involving the developers early on in the creative process, I think one of the long-running misconceptions is that people seem to think that programming isn't creative. But coding is actually really creative because you've got so many different ways to do things, and you've got to work out the most efficient way to do something. And people are starting to realize that coders aren't just code monkeys. They aren't just people that you sit on a laptop, on a machine, on a keyboard, in a cellar that lock them away. I think people are starting to realize that it's actually quite a creative process in itself. Not necessarily visually creative, but you kind of have loads of different pieces of a puzzle, and you've got to try and work out what the puzzle is and how to put everything together. I think it's good that people are finally starting to realize that, because it is necessary. Because then you've got a better idea of what you can and can't do as well.
I guess there's a difference between art and creativity, which oftentimes when we're young, they don't teach us the difference between those two things, but it is making, isn't it?
It's making.
Right down to the name of your company. And
like, we're all makers. Like, there's whether it's the dreamer or whether it's the designer or whether it's us developers, the 5 of us, we're all makers. Doesn't mean that you're not, like, you don't have to be making something physically with your hands to be a maker. It's if you're just making something, right? So, yeah.
I mean, technology is just like a great way of making things happen. Whether it's a pen, whether it's a code, they're all tools to make things happen. And we've got an incredibly deep and intense tool now, which is code, which you master, which I don't. I don't code, to be honest. But it's an incredible new tool to build things you could only dream about a couple of weeks ago. I think it's really important to have that in mind when you think about building experiences.
And for those who don't know what code is, like, all it is a list of instructions to tell the computer to do something. You've got a long list, and it's all based off algebra. So I was quite good at maths at school, and it does help to be a coder. And your mind, it's all logic. It's logic, algebra, and a long list of instructions. That's all it really is. It's just writing something down that the computer can interpret. It's never a case of the computer does it for you. Someone has to tell the computer what to do. And so that's what code is. Because there's a lot of people who don't realize that, which is quite a simple little thing.
We try to do the same thing in terms of bringing developers in right at the brainstorming level, even if it's not the developers who will necessarily work with in the end. A developer who has a wide range across what technology is out there, what's possible and what's not, often has those really good, well, what if we did it this way questions?
Yeah.
And that's something that's really benefited a number of our projects.
And that's why I like the fact that the 3 of us are jack of all trades, master of none, because it does mean that we're open to various different possible solutions. And you're not just constrained to one thing. It's a funny thing with developers is we're looking for new developers is when people are hiring, they often so there are lots of different programming languages, right? There's, let's say PHP is a programming language. And people often go hiring for a PHP developer, when actually most programming, if you're a good developer, you can learn a programming language pretty quickly. like I did a project for Microsoft that was using C#, which is their proprietary language. Never used C# before, and had done the project was complete within a night. Like had never used C#, but it wasn't that different to everything else because they're all pretty much the same. They've just got different quirks. So yeah, being a jack of all trades, master of none as a developer, I think, is an important thing, definitely, especially with how it all changes so quickly.
Great. Okay, we've got some time for questions from the audience, and there's someone in the front row who's jumping out of his seat. So I'm going to go to questions a little bit early. Oh, except we're going to have the person who got the microphone first in the back, and then we'll have the guy in the front row who's jumping out of his seat, and I'll give him a little extra time.
Cool.
Hello.
Hey, you guys talk about choosing the best people for the job. How do you go about choosing the best developers for a job? What do you look for? And
References. References is all about references, and the quality of your projects, obviously, is going to drive the best people. If you've got the best project ever, you're going to drive the best people to work on it. And I think it's really a matter of always keeping an open mind and an open eye to the market. And when it comes to digital, you need to think global. Like, don't just look for developers on your market. Like, I work in France, but I'm willing to work with Sid across the channel. Why not? That's really important.
Your reference is a great one, right? Like hearing, it's not just what their project was, right? How, like, it's better to speak to the customer of them, because if you're looking to be the customer of a developer, then it would be much better to get the point of view from another customer, because some developers are a ball ache to work with. Like, they really are. And they'll throw jargon for the sake of throwing jargon, and will try and confuse you, and will try and, like, just baffle you for the sake of baffling you, because there are a lot of developers who like to pretend that they're cleverer because they can use long words and words that people don't understand. I don't understand most of those words. Like, I quite like to keep things simple. There's quite often programming terms that I use, like programming techniques that I use on a day-to-day basis that, yeah, I've got no idea what they're actually called. And someone will mention something like big O notation. I've got no idea what big O notation was until someone had to explain to me. And yet, it's something that I do normally anyway.
Big O notation sounds like a band.
Right, yeah, and it's big O, all that means is, so let's say you've got a collection of 10 things and you want to go through each 10 items. If you go through each one once, that is apparently big O notation 1. No, it's not, you just looped it once. So there's, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm an odd one because I don't get most of the jargon that some developers use, even though some people consider me to be a decent developer. I mean, I'm learning all the time. I certainly couldn't call myself an expert because that's the beauty of my job.
Second thing I think is also important is references and talking to the people. It's not because you're looking for someone who's going to develop that you shouldn't talk to them. Like, emails are great. I think a phone call makes a whole world of difference too, wherever the person is.
Or Skype.
I totally agree with you guys. The other thing that I do is there is that conversation because I look for a team fit because, like you said, some developers, not all obviously, can be incredibly difficult and rigid. And when we're trying to deliver a project for a client, I'm looking for the person who's going to be the team player as well, and the person who approaches problem solving the same way we do so that they feel equally vested. I don't like to just go, oh, here it is. You know, I want them to feel vested in it. I want them to have a creative stake in it and come back to me when they're working on it and go, you know what? We think we should do something even better. We think we can change, you know what, this is what we thought, but as we got into the problem, we've continued to solve it, and then we can go back to the client and potentially offer them something better. So really looking at that problem-solving part of what they do and the team fit, because I think the problem-solving is where the creativity is. It's not the visual creativity necessarily, but it's that problem-solving thing.
Oh, absolutely. There might be like a lot quicker way to do something very similar to what the original idea was, but actually you've come up with a better and quicker way to deliver it.
Yep.
Which is definitely a creative skill.
Okay, this gentleman in the front.
Hello. To the lady that asked the question how to pick a developer, I had the same problem. I don't know if she's going through that problem, but I hired a developer overseas, based in Asia, and I was in Canada, and that was, you know, I had to go through more than one developer until I found the right person, and once I did, I kind of clinged on them, like, don't go, we need to work together long term. So I kind of understand what both you're talking about, because at one point I give him an idea. Thankfully, there's no language barrier. We speak the same language, and we kind of understand each other. But then at one point, he's like, no, I can't do this. But then when you go a little bit further, like, but what if you try this, and then you try that? And then he's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I could do something. And then he goes for like 3-4 hours, then comes back and then, look, I did that. So how far can you push a developer without pushing, you know, them not wanting to work with you and maintaining this long-term relationship? Because obviously I want to work with this guy.
Tough one.
I face this issue every
Until they
single
stab
day.
you.
So I don't think we've ever said that we can't do something. I strongly believe that if there is budget available, I could set up some kind of way to get to the moon. And now, don't get me wrong, the budget that would need me to hire some kind of NASA expert or outsource it to, like, I probably would just outsource it all to NASA or something along those lines. But, like, no problem. Yeah. I haven't yet come across a problem that can't be solved. And I've never liked the developers that say I can't do it. I always test. Adam, is he in here? No. Thank God. So I always test Adam with, I think it would be better if you just did that. And he's like, And then I don't hear anything. And then half an hour later, he comes back and says, done. But he never says that, no, I can't do that. Or like, that won't work.
Or I would sometimes show them an example. Be like, look, you see this website? Just, you know, this happened, so we can do it in one way or another.
Yeah, so I think, well, yeah, I probably wouldn't like that developer. Because if he hasn't got his own initiative to discover if something can be done or research if something can be done, that's probably not a developer I personally would hire. But it sounds like apart from those issues, he's a very good developer.
Oh, yes.
Right.
And one final question, please. You mentioned that, you know, 6 months ago there were technologies that you weren't able to. What is an example of something that you weren't able to use 6 months ago and you have it available right now, or vice versa, or, you know, something
so
that
there's loads of stuff with, so the current buzzword bingo in the tech world is HTML5, right? It's a buzzword. But there are parts of the new JavaScript APIs which are bundled under this HTML5 tag, such as webcam stuff. Not just like without Flash, right? So there's simple webcam stuff you can do in like Chrome, for example. We did a thing using it to track fish. We green screened fish and created a musical instrument out of them because we wanted to learn this new, it's called Get User Media. We wanted to learn this new thing, so we thought we would track fish because obviously what else do you do when you've got a webcam? You might as well track fish, right? So there's all these little bits and pieces of a puzzle that are all starting to appear and come out. And there's lots of little things that you can now do, like, yeah. So I can't think of like a major thing that's happened in the last 6 months that we could use, but lots of little pieces. There's loads of them.
Okay, have we got time for one more question? There's someone who's got the mic, but technically we're out of time.
Wow.
Yes? No?
Well, it's not a question.
Yeah, okay,
it's
one more.
a reaction. You said that HTML5 was a buzzword. It's
Sure.
It's not a buzzword. It's a new way to make the content being delivered on all the devices.
Well, it's...
Well, Flash can't reach people who has iPhones and iOS devices.
Oh, yeah, totally. No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But it's using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Well,
which is being bundled under HTML5. It's basically, it's been picked up as a buzzword so that to convince people not to use Flash and so that they are aware that it can work across multiple platforms. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that it's being used as a buzzword, but it still is. I mean, it's not HTML.
I think just
HTML.
closing on that, though, maybe what you meant as a buzzword is what happens to us, which is that we get people calling us saying, can you do HTML5?
Right.
And I always say, what do you want?
What's the idea?
Right.
And they say, we want an app. And I go, well, what are you trying to achieve? What story are you trying to tell? And that's when it's a buzzword, is when someone wants to buy it because they read about it in Wired or someplace and think, oh, I have to have one of those. You know.
So a friend of mine was working on the new Ford website, and he sent me a link when it went live and said, we've just launched the site and it's in HTML5. I copied and pasted the code and I changed the doc type so that it was XHTML 1.1, and I said, now it's XHTML. It's no longer HTML5. It's one line of code to change it from HTML5 to not HTML5, right? Because there are certain elements of HTML5, like the get user media stuff, the webcam stuff, and there's a few other like semantic things that are for machine readable stuff rather than user readable stuff, which is actually HTML. And there are, I've gone totally where I was going. That's the lack of sleep from last night.
Shall we wrap up?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll all be here to talk to you. Thank you for joining us in the conversation, and hope you've enjoyed today at MIPCube, and see you tomorrow for the rest of the program. Thanks.
Thank you.